Welcome to the interview portion of the Lower Makefield Township Board of Supervisors meeting. I believe we have a Matt Farrell who's coming in to interview for the Electricity Reliability Committee. Good evening, Matt. How you doing?
Good. How about yourself?
Good. Thank you so much for coming out and throwing your name in the hat. We appreciate it. I'm going to turn it over to some of the supervisors who are going to have some questions for you, and feel free to answer however you would like. So with that being said, Supervisor Weiss, do you have any questions for Matt?
I do not, Matt, but thanks for volunteering. We
Yep.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Excellent. Supervisor Lewis?
Hey, Matt. Pleasure to meet you. A couple questions. What inspired you to choose the Electricity Reliability Committee? And where do you live in the township?
I live in Heacock Meadows, right across from the Giant and the McCafferty's and the fire station.
Yep.
So what inspired me is just I've done a little bit of research in the past on energy grid policies for a consulting company I worked for, and I looked into New York and I looked into some of the things that they're doing to create more resilient grids. And I always thought it was really interesting work, and I'd like to do more of it. But the opportunity never presented itself again. So I saw this and I thought this would be a good opportunity to do some research and learn about energy grid modernization, different policies, different technology, different opportunities you could employ, and how that could be focused at a local level.
And where you live, have you had a lot of power outages in the last year, 2 years, or have you been rock solid?
Pretty good. We maybe had like one.
One. Okay, good. Okay. I'll yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Supervisor Blundy, do you have any questions for Matt at this time?
I feel like Matt is burying the lead a little bit since he's already a volunteer on EAC, and he was the individual who orchestrated our candy bar recycling efforts. So the more Matt wants to give, the more I think, yay.
Thank you.
Excellent. And Supervisor Grenier?
Welcome back, Matt, and thank you for your work on the EAC. I am the liaison to the Electricity Reliability. So you'd have to see me some more, so apologies ahead of time. I'm curious your thoughts. The Electricity Reliability Committee has been pondering its future and looking at possibly different avenues. So you were talking about distributed energy and I think you might have said smart grid and things of that nature. So I'm curious as to what you might see as what you would like to get into as part of that committee, and how you'd like to put that to good use in the township.
Yeah. Most of my research was done at the state level, so I don't know how that relates to the township and what would be relatable and what would not be relatable. I do have some good LinkedIn contacts that I just made, and I'd like to pick their brain more, but I've never really had the opportunity. But I think this would be a good opportunity to learn more and to, I guess, to see what the options are. I think everything depends on how we currently, where our energy comes from, and what state the grid is in, and what financial resources are there, and what makes sense holistically in a bigger picture with all those factors in mind. And I'd like to just focus on research, maybe trying to help lend my hand with some contacts that I have, just to provide, the best possible information to the board, and to see, could we get a good picture for what a future would look like. I'm definitely not an expert, so I don't have a clear picture now, but I'd like to use my time, if I was selected, to try to create a cohesive, forward-thinking picture for what the future could look like in the next 5 years or so.
That's actually really interesting. Have you taken up that there's my personal view is that some of what you're looking at is probably maybe better served on the EAC actually as a special project based on some of the work that they do. Not telling you not to do the ERC by any means, but the ERC is historically, I think, has been a little more interested in reliability and following up
Okay.
with PICO and specific issues, et cetera.
Oh, interesting.
Not to dissuade you, but just giving you a good picture of what you're getting involved with or signing up for.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. I guess so what with the ERC, you say it's mostly about following up with Pico, but not so much as promoting different technologies or different opportunities for strengthening the grid or modernizing the grid.
Well, it's usually done through PICO, through conversations
Okay.
with PICO. So, which all hardening of the grid, reliability, all those keywords that we talked
Mhm.
about are because PICO's our service provider.
Okay.
That's usually the ideas might come up and then put through to PICO and see if they're responsive or not.
Yeah. I guess that would be still interesting. Coming from, just kind of like a research background, I could definitely, I definitely would see myself providing that research and maybe forwarding that to Pico, trying to help them to maybe connect them with people that could provide insight into new programs or new policies or something that could maybe help them to strengthen the reliability of the electricity here at Lower Makefield.
Well, we would all benefit from that, I think, if we could do that.
Yeah.
I have no more questions, but I do thank you for putting your name in the hat and for volunteering already on the
Thanks.
EAC and moving forward with the ERC.
Matt, thank you again. We appreciate your time and you will be hearing from us soon.
Great, thank you.
Have a great night. Thanks.
Too.
All right. We're going to actually take a 6-minute break. I'm going to go get Dave and everybody else and tell them to come back in. So if you want to just take us off air and we'll come back at 7:30. Good evening and welcome to the November 16th Lower Makefield Township Board of Supervisors. I am your chair, James McCartney. I ask that we all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we'll do a quick roll call. Supervisor Weiss.
Here.
Supervisor Lewis.
Here.
Supervisor Grenier.
Here.
Supervisor Blondie.
Here,
Excellent. Just a reminder, public comment on agenda items will be taken as each item is discussed. Community announcements, reminder during this portion of the agenda, residents and youth organizations may call in to make a special announcement or contact the township at admin@lmt.org to request an announcement. Lower Makefield Township will be hosting a blood drive for the Red Cross on Wednesday, November 23rd from 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. in the meeting room at the Township Building located at 1100 Edgewood Road. I believe Supervisor Grenier, you have an announcement?
Yeah, I know, since I've gotten a lot of questions about the leaf collection, we got an update today. And this is actually a reminder to join our email distribution list through Constant Contact. You would have also received this reminder in your email accounts today. Zones 1 through 8 have received their first round of pickup already. Crews are currently active working in zones 9, 10, 11, 12, 14, 16, and 17. Zones starting in the next few days are zones 13, 15, 18, and 19. And next week, crews are anticipating starting zones 21 through 26. I will note that obviously there's no favoritism here towards supervisors because the one zone that is not listed is zone 20, which is the zone which I live in. So I'm anxiously awaiting our leaf pickup. That's a joke, Mr. Fuller. Public Works appreciates all the resident support and would like to remind everyone that the schedule for the second round of pickups shall be published next week. Also a reminder, please keep all leaf piles off the roadways, away from obstacles such as mailboxes and trees, and not blocking any storm inlets. That's all.
Thank you, Supervisor Grenier. At this time, I'll entertain a motion for consideration approval of minutes for November 2nd, 2022.
So move.
Second.
Motion made by Supervisor Weiss, seconded by Supervisor Lewis. Any discussion? Any public comment? Hearing none, call to question. All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, none. Motion carries 5-0. I will turn it over to Supervisor Blondie for the treasurer's report. I think you're on mute.
yeah, I'm on mute and I don't have my glasses, so it's gonna be like a double win. Make a motion to approve the interfund transfers and payroll for October 2022 in the amount of $4,676,558.19.
Second.
Motion made by Supervisor Blondie, seconded by Supervisor Weiss. Any discussion? Any public comments? Hearing none, call to question. All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Motion carries 5-0.
And then I'll make a motion to consider approval of the warrant list from November 7th, 2022 in the amount of $1,901,736.40.
Second.
Motion made by Supervisor Blondie, seconded by Supervisor Weiss. Any discussion? Any public comment? Hearing none, call to question. All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, motion carries 5-0. Thank you, Supervisor Blondie. Next, we are going to do the engineer's report. Andy, what I'm going to do is just ask for a motion on each one of these change orders. And then if there's discussion with the supervisors, they can just ask you.
Sure.
So I'll entertain a motion to consider change order number 3 for the 2022 road program.
So move for $3,343.10.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made by Supervisor Weiss, seconded by Supervisor Blondie. Any discussion?
Andy, this is just for additional work that they identified during the course of the repaving.
Yes, this was after they milled the roadway. They discovered a sinkhole and had to repair it.
Any public comment? Hearing none, call to question. All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. I'll entertain a motion to consider change order number 4 for the 2022 road program project to James D. Marcy in the amount of $9,041.44.
So moved.
Second,
Motion made by Supervisor Weiss, seconded by Supervisor Blondie. Any discussion?
I guess since probably a similar situation that they're finding, generally speaking, do we build in any or do they build in any contingency in their budgets for these here and there, every line item they find? Is that an add-on as we go through this big program this year?
As we go through the big program this year, there will, we've been tracking the quantities. These are particular quantities that they exceeded the initial amount because we assumed a certain amount during design for handicap ramps, and given the existing conditions, it was discovered that higher quantities were needed for the ADA ramps to be in compliance. And then the others were an adjustment of basically a credit back to the township for the inlet tops that weren't needed to be used. So typically how we handle this is we'll have one change order at the end of the project where we itemize everything that has changed, and that usually ends up in the township's favor because we do add some contingency in there. But this time, because of the scale of the project, the concrete subcontractor wants paid for the additional work that they've done thus far, and therefore we're processing the change order now in the middle of the project.
So we're gonna be, we'll have more coming along the way.
There will be, yes.
Any other supervisor questions? Any public comment? Hearing none, call to question. All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Motion carries 5-0. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to consider pay application number 5 for the 2022 road program project to James D. Marcy in the amount of $483,903.18.
So moved.
so moved.
Supervisor Weiss made the motion, seconded by Supervisor Grenier. Any discussion? Any public comment? Hearing none, call to question. All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, none. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to consider pay application number 1 for the Skylar Drive Tennis Court project to Keystone Sports Construction in the amount of $88,463.23.
I'm sorry, that's $88,466.23.
Thank you. Let the record state it's $88,466.23. I should just let you say it.
So moved.
Second,
Motion made by Supervisor Weiss, seconded by Supervisor Blondie. Any discussion? Absolutely.
Is this the balance of the project, or is there still more to come out?
No, this is 25% of the project.
So I have a little bit of concern with this one because we had to put a stop work order on them. We got an update from Monica this week that said that there were some issues that they were still trying to work out. So I'm a little concerned that we're moving forward with payments when it doesn't sound like everything's been going according to plan thus far.
Everything has not been going according to plan thus far, but we've been monitoring them. We've been making the necessary adjustments during the construction to make sure that the township's getting what they paid for. This is 25% of the project. The work that they've completed has exceeded 25% of the work. They have the paving down for the tennis courts. They have the drainage improvements in, and they're installing the fence around the perimeter of the court. So we feel like we're comfortable recommending payment to this because the work that has been completed thus far and been accepted by us is in excess of the amount being
What do
paid.
you think percent complete is then?
I would say percent complete is right around 45%.
And it's 25%.
This is 25%, yeah.
Yeah, it just leaves me uneasy with some
Yeah.
stuff I've been hearing from the field. That's all.
Okay. Any other discussion items? Any public comment? All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, none. Motion carries 5-0. And finally, I'll entertain a motion to consider escrow release number 4 for Prickett Preserve commercial development to ELU DeLuca Yardley LLC in the amount of $744,650.
Second.
Motion made by Supervisor Grenier, seconded by Supervisor Weiss. Any discussion?
That's the normal question. Or, I guess this is for you, Andy.
Yep.
How comfortable are you with this payment versus the work that's been done to date?
We're confident that the work to date covers the escrow release. This includes approximately 75% of the storm water management systems that are underground. They've put in stone for the roadways, storm sewer. So we have an inspector out there who went out and verified all the quantities that they had applied for. So we're confident that this is a correct value.
How far along are they with their on-site civil works?
So this is for the commercial portion of it. I would say that they're probably 35%, 30%. Some on that side. And then, they have a lot of the underground work completed. So now it's really just a matter of finishing the surface work and grading it.
And we'll probably hear more about that a little later this evening. So
Yeah.
that's good enough for me.
Excellent. Any other discussion? Any public comment? Hearing none, call to question. All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
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 Motion carries 4-1. Let the record state Supervisor Lewis was the nay. Moving along to agenda item number 8, project updates, Memorial Park project update.
So the contractor has been out there to address punch list items from DCNR. That work is completed. The only outstanding item for that would be to line stripe the parking lot, and we have a contract in place with a contractor to do that. We expect that work to be completed, shortly, within the next week or so.
I was gonna say, Dan's gonna ask about dirt piles.
What's the latest on the compacted stuff?
They've put some stuff out there, and they've said
What's kind of stuff?
they've put some topsoil, seed, and straw out there. It's not enough topsoil, in my opinion. I think at this point I would discuss with the township to hold the money that we were going to pay them to topsoil it and just do it ourselves.
They do put an inch down or something?
No, it was more like they did it in spots as opposed to a blanket area.
So that's a future agenda item. Or
Uh,
a future discussion item that we could discuss doing it ourselves versus right now.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, no, let us know. We'll put on the next agenda if that's something that you're recommending, that just pull that escrow money and do it ourselves.
Right.
Okay. The multi-use trail?
That's outside of my purview.
No update on that.
No update on that, okay?
Chief, one quick question. Are we on track for filing for our reimbursement on that?
I don't know.
Okay.
Woodside Bike Path?
Woodside Bike Path, the contractor is proceeding with getting their material submittals to us. So we're in the process of reviewing that. They still haven't provided us with a schedule on when they're going to be out there putting shovel in the ground. So we're anticipating getting that shortly.
And last but not least, the 2022 road program.
2022 road program, we have 2 roads to complete. The Maple Vale and Meadow Drive. And then they have some minor punch list items as far as line striping and things to take care of, repair to curb that was damaged and things like that during the contract. So we anticipate the contract that, so PA American Water went in and installed a water line within Maple Vale earlier this summer. They never restored the trench to the point where it was acceptable. Their contractor's in there doing that now, putting in the necessary base course so that we can pave over top of it. That should happen for the rest of the week. Then we anticipate paving the roads early next week.
So, any questions on any of those items for Mr. Pockel? Sure.
Looks like getting back in that neighborhood, it looks like they built it down 3 inches or so, plus or minus, right? So that part's done.
Yep,
Waiting on PA Water to do their thing.
exactly.
I'm wondering, because I've been hearing a lot about this lately from different folks, if we should be reviewing our requirements for when utilities open trenches in the road to expand requirements from narrow 4 or 5 foot trench to
Paving half the road or
the
something like
road
that.
or whatever it may be, just because it seems like we're running into this issue more and more.
I think that we're in conversations with Public Works on road opening permits and what is going to be required in the future. I'm happy to help with, working with the Public Works Department on that.
Thanks, Dan.
Any other discussion items? Any public comment regarding any of the project updates? Okay, hearing none, we're going to move over to the chief's report. Chief, I'm going to start with 9B first.
Okay,
Give you a nice easy one.
sure. This is a request from Coles to extend their hours past 10 o'clock during the holiday season, beginning on Friday, 11/25 through Saturday, 12/24. Some of the night hours would be extended to 11 PM and other nights it will be to 12 PM. This is pretty routine in every holiday season. They request this of the board.
Okay. Do I hear a motion?
Moved. Second.
Motion made by Supervisor Weiss, seconded by Supervisor Grenier. Any discussion? Any public comment? Hearing none, call to question. All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Opposed?
1. Motion carries 4-1. And then I will move you back to motion to authorize advertisement for the adoption of the 2023 preliminary budget.
All right, Chair, we're requesting that the board authorize the advertisement for the adoption of the 2023 preliminary budget. On November 10th, there was a special public budget session. Mr. Kurt Ferguson did an overview of the budget and presented to the board. Also, each department head was present to talk about their individual budgets. Here tonight also is Mr. Ferguson to answer any questions that the board may have regarding the 23 budget.
Excellent, Mr. Ferguson. Thank you for joining us tonight. I will open this up to any supervisors that are interested in making any comments or questions. I'm sorry. Oh, you have to make a motion first. You're right.
Make a motion to authorize advertisement of 2023 preliminary budget.
Second,
Motion made by Supervisor Weiss, seconded by Supervisor Blondie. Now it's official. I can open it up to discussion. So if you want to start?
Look at me?
Yeah,
Sure.
take it away.
All right. So I was not able to attend the supervisor specific 2-1, I'll call it the 2-on-1 meetings beforehand because I was traveling for work and I ended up watching the meeting. So I'm like get caught up. But the one thing that I would love to see added to the budget would be how would I describe this? Some dollar amount to be spent at the new township manager's discretion to hire one additional staff person, which would at their discretion would either be, in my mind, either a finance director or an assistant township manager or a hybrid of the two. One, because I think everyone we've reviewed or spoken to and looked at, I think just about everyone has a finance manager. So I think that's something that the township would benefit from. I know years past and speaking with Mr. Ferguson, who's here tonight, he's spent hundreds of hours on budgets every year, which can take a manager away from doing some of the other managerial roles that they might like to do. And the township would benefit from when they don't necessarily have to be doing that with a finance manager. At the same time, an assistant township manager, one of the, if I can use the word complaint, might be strong, but one of the biggest criticism we get as a township is responsiveness. And I think a lot of that is because the staff we have is, you know, redlining it, as it were, in terms of workloads. And I think someone in that position could alleviate some of those issues and allow them to do a better job at their jobs versus having to be the person that does all the responding. So I would very much like to see not a specific finance director or a specific assistant township manager, but some line item in the budget that would allow for the new township manager at some point during their first year of their new tenure to make that decision to move forward with a new hire. I'd be happy to see that. Otherwise, in going through the budget, I had some concerns about, and this isn't the budget per se, but it just looking back at last year and maybe predictions for next year relative to the pool and golf. I think the pool didn't break even last year. In fact, I think it lost a few bucks, but at the same time, we're also spending another $200,000+ just on the pool in what are those fun maintenance filters using non-budget items through the Recovery Act stuff. And I think we may have another one of those coming up fairly soon, possibly a similar amount. So I just want to make sure that, you know, we're spending a lot of money in Park and Rec specifically outside of the budget, whether it's sewer funds or the Recovery Act funds. So I just want to be very careful in the Park and Rec department about making sure that the budget itself is able to cover Park and Rec issues versus going outside the budget, because in the future that could get hairy. And golf, I think early estimates, once payments were made on the debt, that golf would kick back closer to $700,000 or $800,000 or more per year. And please correct me if I heard this wrong, but it sounds like it was more along the lines of 400,000 or so, plus a few other things to Park and Rec. So I was hopeful that number would be higher. And that also leans on golf a little bit to address the food and beverage issues that we've always wanted to address. Other than that, I was generally was hopeful that after acquiring so much, selling the source system and getting such a large payment, that we might be able to find a way to, then I understand there's not, but I'm hopeful in this near term that we're able to reduce taxes a little bit, since we were able to, since we did sell our biggest asset. So I don't have any other detailed comments, but those are the sort of bigger picture items that stuck out to me as I hope we can address in the near term. And obviously the staffing would be one that I'd love to see. That's all.
Thanks.
You're referring to tax decreases in years.
It would have been, I'm honestly, it would have been great to see this year, but but as part of a plan, right? We always want to see a plan to try and do that to the best of our abilities, because other costs, as we know, other costs are increasing with inflation and everything else. So whatever we can do on our end to bring the total cost of living down in Lower Makefield, that would be appreciated.
So. Sure.
I
Yeah.
do want to go over golf real quick. So if we could, can you hear me out of this mic? Is that good?
Yes.
So for this year, the expected net positive cash in golf would be about $781,000. We are transferring a significant portion of that to the general fund, to a golf bond repayment fund, Parks and Rec capital. So, and the number for next year, the budgeted number, it's not an actual number, for cash surplus would be $852,000. So those numbers are there. We're putting them to work in various areas. That's certainly for the board's discretion. The only item I would point out that we did talk about, if you saw the meeting again, was the amount that would be left outstanding that the golf course would be responsible for back to the general fund for the assistance over the last number of years would be $1,365,000, which the 455 for 2023 that's on that final expense page of the golf course represents essentially 1/3 of it, with the idea that that would be repaid at the end of 2025. Then after that, if you wanted to continue to have that as a revenue source for the general fund, you certainly could, or dedicate it to anything else you'd like to dedicate it to. So those amounts are put in there. The Park and Rec Capital Fund would be is at least allocated $150,000 from those surplus funds, $75,000 to Golf Capital, which essentially was intended to be a longer term capital account for like irrigation replacement, what have you. And then that $75,000 repayment item on the golf debt itself. If you'll notice in the budget, in that golf bond repayment fund, which is in the pages that immediately precede the golf fund itself, is an overview of what was essentially owed back to the golf course, which is $13,690,000 and change. These dollar amounts do essentially represent trickles back into the account, but getting that memorialized in the books, that would be repaid so the board could track that and do with it what it would like going forward. That's all I have, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ferguson. Supervisor Lewis, did you want to add something?
Yeah, in generally, I'm supportive of Supervisor Grinder's suggestion. And viewing that as a placeholder to give the new township manager, whoever she or he may be, the discretion to get a finance director or assistant township manager. And that wouldn't be too burdensome in terms of the I think what we were talking about, was it Fund 1, Department 400 is personnel. That's where it would be, right? In that very first one. So is it something we put in there? Because we wouldn't anticipate, even in the best case, it'd probably take 6 or more months for them to even bring a person online. So if we were something like 75,000, would that be reasonable all in? And then you'd have to maybe do something to the other elements too.
Are you asking about a dollar amount?
Yeah, just a rough idea.
So, well, I mean, it depends. So I guess it depends. So finance director, most finance directors now, I'll give you an example. Newtown hired a finance director this year. They hired her at 105, which is fairly typical. That would be the range. An assistant manager, maybe a little less than that. That's just salary. Obviously, you'd have to budget for essentially a family policy if you want to cover your expenses for healthcare. So, I'd say if you were budgeting for the position, $8,000 to $10,000 a month in salary to be safe, with $2,000 a month to be set aside for health insurance. And then if you factored the months, that's the same way when we factored, we're hiring a labor in the Public Works Department. We pick May 1st, and that's, how that string is run out. So the only other thing I would add to the comment, if the board is contemplating that you could think about, would be a position that could be considered as well, that could even roll into some of those, would be an HR director as well. Finance director, HR, assistant manager, that if that manager came in and decided he or she would prefer not to have a finance director, but maybe an assistant manager and an HR director in those capacities could be useful as well. It would be something that's not really present here for staffing. That, we know that those things can be tedious.
But then you're thinking, then we're not that far off. Then if the person's like 105, say for 6 months, it's like 52. Then you've got the other stuff, it's probably around 75, 80 all in maybe.
Yeah, I mean,
So one of the problems I have, and I understand staffing issues, and the manager may, when he or she comes starting work and after some evaluation, may require a finance director or assistant manager or HR director, whatever. We do have funding streams that can deal with that for next year. I hesitate putting it into the budget, however, because we operated a structural deficit. Putting that in the budget now means, which means that our general fund will go down faster, which will mean tax implications sooner than later. So at this point, I'm not ready to put that in the budget.
Supervisor Weiss, just to build on your point, right? You do have pots of money in there that would not require you
Correct.
to, let's say, reopen the budget, what have you, whether that be sewer proceeds, whether that be rescue plan money. Now there is maybe 370,000 or so that you could do that at any time. I mean, obviously, then that would be a hit on next year's budget if you hired someone midstream. And either way, you might get tagged later, but it wouldn't impact at least your budgeted fund balance for
Right.
this year.
And we could deal with it for next year for the 24 budget. But for this year, I would think that if the new manager decided to increase staffing, we could fund it other than budget money at this point and deal with it in the 24 budget. So I would be, right now, I'd be against adding it to the budget at this time.
Aren't we converting somebody in finance from part-time to full-time? And wouldn't
Yes.
that, yeah, so, I'm with you, I too was hopeful that we would be able to do something for taxes this year. But looking at everything that we have going on, I just think we cannot do it this year. I hope with more than hope next year. And I do want to continue that kind of thoughtful planning and spending. So I would say, let's see what the new manager says they need. Let's see what this new full-time asset we have in finance helps to do in terms of alleviating things, and think about more positions next year.
Thank you, Supervisor Blondie. Any public comment regarding this, or did you want to go back?
The suggestion from Mr. Ferguson is that we could in fact hire somebody next year outside the current budget framework.
However, that would involve you hiring them with the funding pool being something outside of your millage and your taxes. If it was something from proceeds, whether it be sewer sale proceeds, whether it be rescue
Yeah.
plan money. The only thing I'll remind you that I've said before, the rescue plan funding, the Department of Treasury put this exemption in that allows you to use it for what you want. I'm not saying that's your preferred choice. I'm
Right.
saying that option's available to you.
I guess at the end of the day, we're going to use or attempt to use all of that funding for other reasons. I don't necessarily, from an accounting perspective, it's probably not, in my mind, not ideal. I'd rather be upfront about structurally what we're doing if we think it's important enough. If the board doesn't, that's fine too, but I think it's important to have that sort of open dialogue about what's really in the general fund, what isn't, and think about sources. I mean, because you could move money from other funds all day long to add to the general fund now because of the golf course and other stuff, so it's an accounting distinction, not much difference, I suppose.
Well, and you're right. However, if we use money from these funds, those funds will dry up and we won't have them anymore. If it's part of the budget, it's part of the millage, and we come up short, we would have to raise taxes. So you want to, we're forming a trust which will eventually generate hopefully enough income to significantly impact the general fund in a positive way. And when that happens, we may be able to add, in a budget way. But until we know that for sure, until we have those things done, we can at least for next year, and we're being very transparent to the public by having this discussion. We can let the new manager decide on what that person wants to add to the staff. If they feel it's necessary, we'll deal with it on with that one-time injection into the payroll. But in 2024, we're going to have to address it with millage. It can only be a one-time thing.
I mean, we're well above safe harbor anyway, so it's not.
But we won't be.
We're talking about a very relatively diminished amount. I agree with you in the long run. You have to be careful everything that hits the general
No,
fund.
I'm just stating my opinion.
Right, so.
I think the personnel issue can be addressed for next year without adding it to the budget, but that's my opinion.
If that's the case, and then this is a question of guidance for whoever the township manager is your mind, you would be comfortable if that person wants a finance director and or a assistant township manager, you would be supportive of that?
Of course. Whatever the manager felt that he or she needed, then we would do our best to accommodate that person. Because we want the township to run as well as possible.
I would also add, not to, consistent with what you're both saying, is that if that person was hired later in the year, even if it came out of the general fund and it was a last month or two, and that line item was essentially staying proximate to where it was budgeted, give or take a few dollars, there's not anything that would prohibit you from doing that either, even if you didn't move that money over. So if that person decided they'd like an assistant manager / HR director, you were going to pay that person $90,000 and they started November 1st, something like that. The cost to the budget line item would be essentially inconsequential for the time of year that you would hire them. That sort of lands a hybrid between both of what you're debating.
As long as the public and the new manager feels comfortable that, you know, we're empowering them to make a decision about that. Certainly positive.
Any other discussion? Any public comment? Where we are on it, I mean, I have nothing else to add to it, so I think if we're good and there's no public comment, we can call to question the motion on the floor, which is to authorize the motion to authorize the advertisement for the adoption of the 2023 preliminary judgment. Call to question. All those in favor say aye, raise your hand.
Aye.
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 Opposed?
Opposed?
Motion carries 4-1. Supervisor Grenier opposed.
To the chair, just quickly,
Sure.
if you've done this in the past, that budget will be on display starting tomorrow. I'm sure the chief will have that. I'm sorry, do I call you chief or a manager? What do you- That's what I feel comfortable. Chief, that'll be online. That'll be available here at the township building. You all can make changes after that 20-day period within certain parameters that the solicitor would advise you on, but that'll be available for public.
Solicitor, remind us of what the parameters are for changes in the budget.
It's under section.
Sorry, I quizzed him.
Okay, no, I
knew he had it open.
Here, so
I know.
it's like, Under 3202 of the second class township code. Upon any revision of the proposed budget, if the estimated revenues or expenses in the final budget are increased by more than 10% in the aggregate, or more than 25% in any major category over the proposed budget, and may not be legally adopted with those increases. So is it again advertised once at least 10 days before adoption. So
Thank you.
now somebody's going to ask me, what is a major category? I don't know. So, but those are the parameters.
All
Excellent.
right, and further for the board, the advertisement requirement should be over by the next first meeting in December. And then the budget will be on the agenda for further discussion and or possible approval.
Thank you again for your work on it, Chief. And Kurt, I appreciate you coming in and helping us out with it.
Problem. Thank you.
If you want to stay around, I mean, so much more fun to be had.
Sorry, I'm packing my bag.
I know, I can see that.
I said, listen, since I'm a consultant, we have consultants here, I used to wave them out when they were done. So
Yeah, sure. All right, get out of here. You're off the clock.
Peter's running. Get out of here.
Get off our clock. All right, so now we are going to move over to Solicitor Truelove. Take it away,
thank you.
number 10.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Briefly, the executive session started tonight at 6:30, ended at 7:15 before an interview of a individual for potential placement on a committee. All supervisors are present along with the chief and myself. Real estate items, litigation items, and informational items were discussed at the executive session. First under my report is a motion to authorize advertising of a police pension ordinance. As you may recall, last meeting, we approved an MOA with the PBA for a new police contract. which will be effective January 1st of this next year. I will also be preparing a final version of the contract to update that consistent with the MOA. What happens whenever we update the collective bargaining agreement, the police rank and file contributions to the pension generally change. They have this time actually it's to the benefit of the township. And what is required then is we have to update the ordinance to reflect their contributions. Also, because in the agreement, the police now are able to use overtime in their pension contributions. We had to change the definition of compensation to do that. Because overtime is now included in compensation for purposes of calculating pensions. Given that, we want to make sure the four command officers who are command officer positions were not part of the rank and file also receive at least a difference that makes it worthwhile for them to be command officers versus rank and file. I would suggest that we change the ordinance to include lesser contributions for command officers as part of this revision. And that's included in the ordinance as well. And we've also broken out and by definition, the rank and file versus command officers. So it's clear in the ordinance why that distinction was made. We have run this by, we have it reviewed by our actuary and she concurred and had a couple of small recommendations, which we've now incorporated into this version. So it's now appropriate to authorize the advertisement of the police pension ordinance if you think it's appropriate. So
I will entertain a
Mayor,
motion.
I move that we authorize advertisement of the adoption of the advertisement of the police pension ordinance update.
Second.
Motion made by Supervisor Lewis, seconded by Supervisor Weiss. Any discussion?
Question. So Dave, you're okay with it, obviously, sounds like.
yes, I mean, we want to make, we talked to the chief a lot about it. And we also talked to the actuary and made sure that she was on board from an actuarial perspective, not just, I mean, not for MMOs, but also from Act 600 language and things like that. So yes, I think it's especially breaking out the command officers, I think it is a better version and a more practical version than we've had before. Other places have, but we're one of the first, I think, to do it this way, which makes sense. So.
I guess, Chief, from your perspective, or even the police union's perspective, do they have any comment on any of this? Or is it pretty straightforward?
Pretty straightforward. Everything, all the terms in here were negotiated with the MMA and,
All the-
you know, it's signed and it's ratified by the union and obviously the board supervisors, you know, at a public meeting. So we're good with everything.
The ordinance is consistent.
Consistent. Everything
Yeah.
is consistent.
That's obviously the most important part. Yep.
Excellent. Any other discussion? Any public comment? Hearing none, call to question. All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, none. Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Next is a resolution that was actually, and we do have the right number here. I want to make sure Mr. Lewis is very helpful in helping guide us through that last time. We do have the appropriate resolution number. This was generated by a request actually from the finance department for years. And this is something unbeknownst to me, despite the fact that I've, fairly familiar with some of the processes here over the years, but up until now, any check over $100 required more than one signature. And I think the check run was supplied to everybody to show how many checks were subject to that would require two people to sign. It's more than a tedious process. So from the finance department, they've requested a resolution that would increase that amount from $100 to $1,000, which would greatly reduce the number of checks that would require two signatures, but does not do anything else other than limit it to one signature, but does not mean anything different in terms of the fiduciary responsibilities of the supervisors or anybody else with respect to the duties in the township. So if it's the supervisors wish to approve this, it'd be resolution 22-18, authorizing the use of one signature checks for amounts not to exceed $1,000.
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Motion made by Supervisor Weiss, seconded by Supervisor Blondie. I'll make a quick comment. I did get approached by Allison regarding this issue. She did give me a rundown. I'm not sure if the other supervisors did get rundown of what that was. But it was
There were
excessive.
hundreds of checks between $100 and $1,000.
Yeah, it was pretty excessive.
And I had no idea about that till they brought it to our attention.
Correct. I'm still surprised we're sending out checks. But what are you gonna do?
And that
Um,
$100 was quite a long time ago when that $100 were set, so. And I don't remember the year exactly when they set it at 100, but it was some time ago.
Over 10?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other discussion regarding this item?
Yeah. I'm not opposed to raising the number, but I think $1,000 is too high. When you go through this, there's a lot of repeat check recipients or payees that are in the several $100 range. So they might not be getting $1,000 check, but they might be getting $8 to $10, $800 checks. And that you don't think anything's wrong with that generally, but you also want to make sure that, I was treasurer and I remember going through a lot of these checks back then with both of our former township managers in the last 5 years or so, and reviewing invoices that go along with some of those checks and being like, hey, it might be a $900 check or something like that, but you can find things in the invoices that are wrong. There were some, for example, Boucher and James, and I said, that looks like they're not doing something right. Have them go back and take a look at this. And these weren't massive checks, but they weren't $50 checks either. But so I have some concern about bringing the number all the way up to $1,000. I might say something more like 500 or something like that, but I'd be willing to discuss that, but I think 1,000 is too high.
If I could,
Absolutely,
I
yeah.
went into the details of the check analysis. So the total checks run this year is 2,476. The 0 to 100 are 514. The 100 to 500 is 894. So it would, and then the 500 to 1,000 is 294. So even if you reduced it to 500, you really are you're only cutting, it's an extra 294, I guess, in checks that would be run throughout the year. That is probably, I guess, 13%. For some reason, I can't run my Excel on here, but it's roughly that. It's the combination of stuff that is always the challenge from an internal control perspective, right? So that you're always like, if you take a $500 or $600 nick 3 or 4 times a week, right? Or what have you, that builds to serious money. And that's why, I could see a good case for being 500 as a starting point. But the other question is whoever the treasurer is, and who's the treasurer this year?
Suzanne.
Suzanne. Yeah, part of that is you'd have to randomly go through some of those to see in the check run, to look for patterns, right? Just randomly look for that stuff. I would do that even when as I'm not treasurer, I would say, okay, why this one for this amount, just to make sure, because we've had billing challenges in the past. But yeah, I don't know. I think I could go either way in the 500 or 1,000. I'm open about it, but at least it gives you a sense that if we get to 500, that knocks out a lot of checks, right? So I guess from a signing perspective, so to date, I guess Treasurer or Supervisor Bundy assigned 2,476 checks.
All with a
Personally?
pen. All with a pen.
The same
Like-
judge.
That's a good pen. Last time.
So,
J.W. Marriott.
You see it.
but yeah, I mean, I'm open.
Yeah, I'm good
in
on
terms of discussion elements. At least I thought, well, let's go back and have a dialogue about it. And if we decide 1,000, if we decide 500, just as long as we're randomly going in there and doing it, because I do that, in bunches. I'll go through and say, why did we have X? And some of the smaller dollar amounts, just because you just don't know.
I think those are good points that you both make, but I think it also leaves out the rest of the process, right? How a check becomes, before someone for signature, and the different steps it goes through in our internal process, right? And the backup that's needed and what they do in finance. And to your point about random spot checks, like I'm pretty good at spotting patterns, but I don't know that I would, be able to do that just by signing the check. So I hear you that it seems like 100 to 1,000 is a big step, but I guess I would look at it in reverse, like, so many things we haven't had the discipline at looking to make sure that we're up to what is common and what makes sense for our processes. So if the staff has done the analysis and they think 1,000 is what's reasonable and what's customary, I kind of lean towards that. Not just because I don't love signing my name, I want it to be valuable as an autograph, but it just doesn't really make sense.
I think, it doesn't matter what the amount is. As I agree with Suzanne, it's a matter of what the process is. We're hiring, we're promoting a part-timer to a full-timer in finance. One of the things that I hope that person does is keep better track of our expenditures and to find those irregularities. We obviously missed them in the past. I think we're much better on that now. I hope we continue to improve on our internal processes. So I'm not too really worried about how much, $1,000 in the scheme of things today is not what $1,000 was even 2 years ago. So if staff says $1,000 is fine, I think I'm okay with it.
Any other discussion? Any public comment? Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat as you are, John. I could lean either way on the 500 or 1,000. I think that the addition of the full-time finance person, as you mentioned, and the recommendation of the staff, but I do agree. I think spot checking obviously would be a good QC for us to have as part of the process. So kind of right in between those two, but I'm going to lean towards the 1,000 only because I feel like that's the staff recommendation at this point. Any other comments? Hearing none, call to question. All those in favor, public comment. Oh, anyone? Hearing none, call to question. All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Motion carries 4-0. Let the record show Supervisor 4-1, I'm sorry, Supervisor Grenier oppose the recommendation or the motion.
Thank you.
I think you were done, or do we have some
Except for
zoning
zoning hearing
stuff?
Board, of course, I always have my soliloquy on the next three, so.
Sure, go for it.
Yeah. Appeal number 22-1986, Megan and Kyle Doherty of an appeal for the property located at 610 Grindon Drive, tax parcel 20-061-024. They request a variance from Township Zoning Ordinance 200-23 capital A in order to install an in-ground concrete pool and patio, which would increase the impervious surface from the existing 29.3% to 35.6%. Whereas 28% is the allowable amount, and they, of course, have stormwater mitigation in their application. We recommend deferral unless there's a different sentiment by the board, which would require a vote. Hearing none. Next, appeal 22-1987, Steve and Lisa Malagi, probably butchering that name, for the property located at 24 Oakdale Boulevard, tax parcel 20-042-107. They request a variance from Township Zoning Ordinance 200-23 capital B in order to construct a single-story sunroom addition, which would increase the impervious surface from the existing 27.1% to 30%, whereas 29% is the allowable amount. Again, we recommend deferral. Hearing no dissent, we'll move on to the final matter. Excuse me. Appeal 22-1988, Greg and Marianne Doyle for the property located at 1499 Brookfield Road, tax parcel 20-072-018. They request a variance from Township Zoning Ordinance 200-19, which would increase the impervious surface from the existing 27.4% to 36.2%, whereas 32% is the allowable amount, and also from Township Zoning Ordinance 200-18, which would decrease the rear yard setback to 1.5 feet, whereas 40 feet is otherwise required in order to install an in-ground concrete pool and patio. I did email the board about this the other day. We, in some respects, recommend deferral, but with the setback issue, we also wonder if there may be a desire to have us participate. So I'm just throwing that out there.
I'll make a motion to participate.
I'll second.
Motion made by Supervisor Grenier, seconded by Supervisor Weiss. Any discussion?
Just to add to what the solicitor mentioned, the 1.5 foot setback on a property line, they back up to forested township land with forested land right up to the property line. So if you're putting concrete in a pool, a 1.5 foot off your off your property line, that means the trees right behind your yard, their drip line and their roots will be right under that concrete.
Just so I'm aware what, because I mean, obviously I'll be telling Barbara Kirk about this. Which, I can look on the map myself. Which township property? Is that farmland preservation? No, it's not farmland preservation.
I'm just on the county side.
Okay, I will,
That the township owns it.
okay, we'll certainly take a look at that. So, but I'm sorry, you didn't vote yet. I apologize.
No, and then there, it's a forested stream too, so that like, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Okay.
So we're participating. That's the motion. correct?
Yes.
If folks want to oppose, I could get on. I recognize the amendment if someone wanted to do that, but I figured people would at least want to participate.
Anybody want to oppose, or are we comfortable with just participating? Participate, no oppose, participate. Motion. Any further discussion? Any public comment? Hearing none, all those in favor of participating in Appeal 22-1988, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We will participate. Did you say aye as well, Suzanne?
I did not.
You said nay.
you
I'm
know,
sorry, let the record state Supervisor Blondie was a nay.
That's what I want to make sure the record was like.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Truelove.
And I am done, and now I'm handing it over to my friend, Mr. Harris, who's appearing on behalf of the Prickett Preserve development.
Certainly not leaving, David.
Oh, no, I'm not leaving. No, I'm
Good
shutting
evening,
down
Mr.
my-
Harris. That one's not on. There we go. There you go.
How about this guy?
That doesn't sound like it's on. If you want to try clicking it and then tapping on it,
Certainly can't see anybody.
try the other way. Maybe it was on.
Hello?
Yes, there you go.
Here I am.
Here you go.
Thank you.
Suzanne, are you not seeing anyone on the screen?
I see the back of their heads.
Okay, if we could flip. that
That's my
camera
best
to
view.
Flip the camera so we can see the front of the,
Thank you.
thank you.
Okay,
Yep.
Sorry.
You don't have
thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Steve Harris. It's a pleasure to be here. Last time I was here in person, I think there were like 350 people inside and outside. So it's good to be back in a little more calm environment. In any event, I represent the developers of Prickett Preserve at Edgewood. As you know, it has had final plan approval and is well under construction. We're in the process of seeking approval of a certificate of appropriateness for the adaptive reuse of the barn. I'm here with Joe DeLuca, who is representing the developer, Paul Johnson, who's the staff architect, and Jeff Marshall, who's the historic barn consultant. We spent 5 long months with our friends at the Harb, some of which were attended by Mr. Grenier and some of which he mercifully missed. But in any event, in that process, as you will see in our presentation, the Harb really made some very constructive suggestions, which my client took to heart, and I think substantially improved the project. The Harb on October the 11th recommended approval of a certificate of appropriateness pursuant to the following conditions: that the roof would be extended with small openings on both sides of the attachment to the barn. The window well would move in 2 feet from each side of the building. The window well would have steps to split it into thirds rather than just to be an open area. Downspout would be moved to the other side of the wooden doors. And all this sounds a little abstract, but we'll have a PowerPoint presentation that will, I hope, put this a little more into focus. that the railing along the window well will be painted in earth tones, and the least intrusive connection to the barn wall for the addition will be utilized. In that regard, what you'll see here in the presentation is with regard to the first five conditions, all of those have been implemented. With regard to the least intrusive connection, we have two alternatives to present to the board for your consideration, both of which are acceptable. Choose one from column A or one from column B, and that'll be fine. And we're looking for a recommendation of a certificate of appropriateness. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Paul. We haven't been here for a while. We're used to seeing this presentation in various forms every time we go back to the harp. So we're sort of getting like, oh, not that again. But we would like to take a moment to reacquaint you with what's being proposed and see how that fits in. And at the end of the presentation, you'll see two examples of significant changes, which I think you'll agree the HARB enabled this project to go forward for the better. A number of the improvements, are just little things, but there are a couple of big things. And so, Paul.
As Mr. Harris said, I'm Paul Johnson. I'm representing Barton Partners, working with DeLuca on this barn renovation. First slide here is just images of the existing barn as it stood at the beginning of this process. It's a three-story barn with the area in white would be a later addition to the barn, somewhere around the early 1800s, I believe, for the age of this barn. Situating you on the site, this is the Prickett Preserve site, with the existing barn marked in blue and the existing house also marked in blue, of the two areas of the existing the existing house that is remaining. This image orients you with that same overall site plan, with the barn and the house located on a central park area with surrounding retail, Wegmans grocery store to the far end, and to the south end of the site would be is currently under construction 200 apartment units, walk-up garden apartment units with a clubhouse. The focus of the barn and the house and maintaining them was to maintain a central park space for the site, with the two having a direct connection across that park to maintain an open area around the historic buildings. This is a perspective view of the barn on the left with the existing house on the right, and that open park space with the surrounding retail and around the parking areas to the northwest or northeast of the site. This would just be an alternate view with the house to the left and the barn to the right, also showing that parking space. This is facing towards the Wegmans with the retail surrounding the barn and existing house. The end use of this project will be a commercial restaurant, maintaining the existing barn, but then adding an addition around the western and southern sides of the building with exterior tiered seating areas that open from with movable walls from the interior of the building to open those patios to the park space of the house and barn connection. The existing barn will be used for seating. The new addition will also be used for seating. The existing second floor of the barn will be additional restaurant area, and kitchen and service equipment will be located in the basement of the new addition. The overall concept of the barn addition was to create a glass box around the existing barn. There's two approaches when you're dealing with something historic. You either try to mimic it or you try to set your addition apart. And we took the approach of setting it apart, using the glass box to use the barn as the actual backdrop. So by using the glass and trying to lighten the facade of the new addition and minimizing the thickness of the roof, the barn is always the backdrop. You can see through that addition with minimal intrusion to that barn. So it's always your focal point of the site. This just represents an alternate view of that, showing that tiered patio seating with the open walls on the west end of the building. As you come around the south end of the building, there's landscaping buffers that soften the new addition against the pedestrian walkway. Working around the south to the southeast of the building, we pulled back the facade of the building to create a open corner to expose the coins of the existing barn, to expose some of the existing doors, and to create a opportunity for green space and a sculpture area on the corner of the existing barn, which on the site is a predominant corner for pedestrian circulation. To the side of this view, I'll point out the well, which was one of the comments from Harb, was to bring in the exterior portions of this well 2 feet from the perimeter. So I'll point on the plan here. This is on the east side of the building. This well is a retaining wall around this eastern end that actually exposes the existing grade of the barn to create a window well for the existing windows of that eastern side of the barn. As part of the Harb's recommendation, we pulled in that well to, again, better expose the corners of the barn to try to minimize the impact on the coins of the corners of the barn. This also demonstrates the relocation of the gutters, which were initially closer to the building. We moved them out towards the opposite end of these existing doors, just to set apart the detail of the connection of the new addition to the barn, which was an important connection to the Harb. This image details that connection where the roof line continues, but as it gets closer to the barn, it cuts back and sets even with the facade of the new addition. And the idea is to create a visual break that makes it obvious where the existing barn ends and where this new addition begins. We carry that to the north side of the building, which I'll show you in a later slide. This would be the north side of the building, which is the existing current entry. It'll be maintained as the entry of the restaurant, as well as the main entry, with that well area to the left with what will be a locked gate for maintenance access to that area. Which the well itself starts off pretty shallow as it tiers down with the current existing grade. It ends up being at about 42 inches at its deepest, which is why we felt that an access point was an important thing to maintain for this one, for maintenance, for cleaning, just general access to that well. And this would be facing towards the south end, where you can see that what on the north side is a 6-inch drop. As you get to the southern end, it becomes a 42-inch drop. And the tiers of this well are covered in stone, but they're also following what is the existing grade of this portion of the barn. It's just demonstrating the heights of each. This would be that northern connection of the addition, much similar to the southern end, where the connection has that recessed area of the roof to create, again, that visual break. In our discussions with the Harb, one of the important concerns they had was how to provide privacy for the users of the restaurant. So at a table height and to the floor level, the glazing will have a film on it to provide a visual break and more of a privacy break also, but we'll still let in light, we'll still let in views both in and out to try to maintain that glass box approach. This would be a night rendering of the barn, just demonstrating what that glass box really could look like at nighttime, with the barn being the backdrop. You're looking through, it's trying to minimize that visual overlay of the new addition. We also plan to uplight the existing barn from the roof to wash the barn walls. So it kind of creates a glowing jewel as you're approaching the site. One of the important things that we've tried to maintain with this addition is to not interfere with the barn in any way that we can. And our approach to that would be to create a structural system that's independent of the barn. So anything with our addition is offset from the existing barn wall. We're not using the existing barn to bear any weight, to bear any structure, minimal tie-ins of expansion joints to existing walls and where floors meet. The only connection point that we really end up with directly connecting to the barn would be where the roof meets the exterior barn walls. We've provided two details after discussion with the HARB of options on how we could make that tie-in. Any kind of roof tie-in to any wall is always a flashing detail that needs to be considered. What we've provided here are two options, with our preferred option being on the left here, which would be to regulate in a piece of flashing over the new addition roof. This is, in our opinion, this is the best detail that you can provide in this kind of addition. It requires the least long-term maintenance. It is the least likely to leak over time. It's really the preferred option for not just a renovation, but any roof tying into a wall like this. The alternate option that we are representing here would be a similar approach where there would be flashing, but instead of regulating into the existing barn facade, it would instead be attached to the mortar joints of the existing stonework with a caulk joint at the top of the flashing. Why this is not a preferred detail is because that flashing or that caulk over time weakens. It requires maintenance. It requires upkeep. It's a more concerning point of water infiltration. Both of these details represent, a standard approach to roofs to stone, and both of them also represent trying to minimize that impact of our new roof on the existing barn. With the only point that's really tying in directly would be this flashing. Everything else would be offset enough that it's capped with an expansion joint between the two. We've also explored materials with the HARB. Represented here is just a key plan showing, horizontal fiber cement siding where the existing siding is on the existing barn, movable walls on the patio area, metal capped fascias, which in speaking with the HARB, we've reduced the depth over time. We were showing a thicker approach. With the HARB's consideration, we've tried to slender it as much as possible to lessen the impact of the roof versus the barn. The exterior glazing will be a solar glazing, just taking into consideration the southern facing of this building, with aluminum frames. The underside of the soffits will be finished with a wood look or an actual wood soffit material. The base of the new addition will be a stucco or something cementitious. We approached with the HARB the possibility of using stone to match the barn. We took the approach of setting it off different with a similar tone to try to tie into the color palette of the barn, but not try to match it exactly. And then railing around the deck or the patio areas would be cable railings. Also in this presentation is just some examples of materials, of actual branded materials along those lines. And just for the record, this is what Mr. Harris mentioned, where the images on the left of this sheet are where we first started 5 months ago with the HARB, and how this building evolved over time. We initially had the corner area of the restaurant bumped up to make it more of a focal point. We had the southeastern end of the restaurant addition more out towards the corner of the barn. And as it evolved over time, we slendered it, we pulled it back, we lessened the impact of the roof lines. And this is all in working with the HARB over multiple meetings and how we got to this point today.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
And I should add, there are no current plans for the house. So we recognize that when a tenant is obtained for the house, we've got to go back through the same process. We anticipate fewer changes to the exterior of the house, but nonetheless, we're committed to do that. So I think we have, I think we have addressed the 5 conditions of extending the roof with small openings on both sides, the window wells moving in 2 feet at each end, steps in the well, downspouts to the other side of the wooden door, and earth tone railing. The only issue that remains outstanding, and Paul, if you could go back to that, is that whether it's option number 1 or option number 2 with regard to the connection of the addition to the barn. The addition will be self-sustaining, as Paul explained. It will not be dependent on the barn wall for support, but you've got to connect it to the barn wall. And so those are the 2 options.
Let's give 'em a quick,
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, feel free.
because this goes into our motion, I think, right? Did Harb feel strongly either way, or did they just, I'm forgetting if they wanted you to just come back with something for this.
Yeah, they asked for a study. Their statement was it should be the least intrusive connection. But they asked for a study, and we've presented the study. So that was their condition.
Andy, do you have an opinion on this as an engineer?
Can I ask
I-
a different question while you guys are talking?
Sure, yeah, Dan had asked Andy if he had an opinion on the,
Oh.
I think the architect hit the nail on the head, that the flashing detail on the left is generally preferred because it's the most effective way of minimizing intrusion of water into the building. But given the sensitive nature of the building, we understand why they provided option number 2, which would be less intrusive, less penetrations into the actual building. So
In the event that has to be removed for some reason, what's I'll use the term scarring. What potential scarring could occur under option 1?
There would be a joint that would need to be grouted or mortared in if the building was ever reversed.
So it could be restored to its current state if removed. Okay. So if we're to make a motion, obviously we want include one of those options.
Yes.
Do you want me to do that now?
absolutely.
All right. I like to make a motion to approve the certificate of appropriateness for 915 Antique Alley, Prickett Preserve barn renovation, inclusive of the barn addition roof connection detail number 1, standard, and if I mispronounce this, please correct me, reglet connection.
We'll make you an architect yet.
Please don't.
second.
Motion made by Supervisor Grenier, seconded by Supervisor Weiss. Any additional discussion?
Yes.
Sure.
I think it's a beautiful renovation plan, and I look forward to having many meals there in the future. The only thing that, and this has nothing to do with construction of the barn, is the outdoor area, the uncovered area. We live in a 4-season climate. Is there enough storage in the barn to, if the tenant wishes to move those tables inside?
The entirety of the new addition will have basement space as well as the existing barn, which already has basement space. So if they needed to move it inside,
And there's also room in the outdoor space for if the tenant wants cover for inclement weather and still keep outside seating.
Well, the upper level is there are, I mean,
Oh, no,
when we go back, there are glass doors.
Not 100% of the outdoor seat.
I'll swing back. So.
People are eating outside and all of a sudden there's a rainstorm or something.
Yeah.
You know, is there arrangements for cover?
No, not at this time, no.
But what is the area that's outside permanently and the area that's got doors and roofs?
So
Can you give him a mic?
Just got done watching The Voice now.
This area right here will be undercover. This area, these are the doors that Paul was mentioning earlier that will open for the outdoor seating. So when the weather is appropriate, those doors can be open. This area and this area, the tier deck, is not covered. If there's a bad rainstorm or something like that, and there's seating out there, the restaurant's going to have to deal with the logistics of, bringing those folks inside or something of that. But so this area is covered. This area and this area is not.
So just so I see it right, it looks like you're losing 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, somewhere around 14 or 16 tables if you have inclement weather during winter, that sort of thing.
Correct.
Okay. And I guess I would ask you, the purveyors of this new restaurant, do they plan on having a liquor license? Do you know?
Yes.
Okay.
How's that for an
Thank you.
answer?
Okay.
You can't, I mean, you can't, this is, hopefully will be an upscale, Italian steakhouse. You can't have an upscale restaurant in this day and age without booze. I mean,
So we're not expecting a drive-in window here.
no drive-in service.
So you've already narrowed it down to that specific.
Yeah, we have
Okay.
been in negotiations. We do not have a formal lease signed yet. But it is a local successful restaurant and looking for their second location. So we're hopeful that we could break that news maybe towards the end of the year or beginning part of next year.
Hold the mic.
Yeah, just Mike a little bit closer. Yeah.
Were you able to hear that or?
Yeah, if you could repeat that, yes.
Getting away.
So we do not have a tenant lease agreement yet for that space, but we have been working with a local restaurant, has been here for many years and successful. So we hope by the end of this year or beginning part of 23 that we'll have a lease agreement. Our goal would be to start the renovation process early in 2023, probably February, March of 23.
And just to reiterate, it's not a relocation of an existing restaurant. It's a second location for an existing restaurant.
That's correct.
Okay.
And it's difficult to negotiate a lease without having an approved plan.
Sure.
And so this is a very important step in being able to accomplish that.
Excellent. Yeah.
So I think this is a good example of why we wrote the overlay district the way we did to include the requirement to go to HARB. You've done a nice job as an architect, but more eyes and more opinions. I think the process, having sat through it and in it and being a part of it for the last several months, there were, like you said, some major details and some relatively minor ones that drastically improved the aesthetic and the look and feel of everything, such that one, I have to say thank you to our HARB is at home watching, who they're all volunteers, but they all are professionals in the field that had some really good ideas that's when I flip it back to you guys saying thank you for listening and taking into account all those items and incorporating those items. I think just pulling the one wall back to expose the doors and throwing in some more green space versus more concrete, and even the sculpture area for that corner, since it's a major thoroughfare for a lot of pedestrians, is going to completely changes the feel of the whole thing and improves it that much more. And all it is moving a couple of things around. I know it probably didn't feel like that when you're.
You don't feel like that while it's going on.
No.
But I think that the conclusion is that it was a very successful process.
Yeah, and
Can I ask my question yet, or are we gonna?
Absolutely, yes.
Can you go back to a
can't see you,
picture of the? Oh, well, I'm here. Can you go
Okay.
back to a picture of the barn, like one of the pretty pictures? So I am not an architect. I don't even know that I have a design eye. So is the cement siding that you talked about, is it that thin because of historical accuracy? Because it looks awkward to me. And I'm
Well,
just
interestingly enough, that was initially designed to be stone to mimic the barn wall. And the Harb felt very strongly that trying to mimic the barn wall with stone, which most likely would not match what the barn was,
no,
was not the right way to go. And they
Yeah.
recommended the plain cement, stucco, whatever you want to call it, facade that would have the earth tones of
No, I
the
don't, think we're talking
barn.
about the same thing. We're looking at the existing barn. Can we go to a pretty new rendition, please? Do stop. The hardy plank siding on the top triangle there. Can it be wider?
Oh, is that the existing side? I know she's talking, correct me if I'm wrong, Suzanne, where the 4 windows, I guess, up top are? Is that,
Yeah.
that's similar, that's the existing side.
So what is it now? 4.5 inch or 6 inch
Probably a 6-inch reveal.
plank? Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably a 6-inch reveal. I think, does Hardy come in an 8-inch reveal?
They do,
Yeah. So.
And if that's historically accurate, I'm not, I just think it looks weird. It looks off to me, whatever my opinion's worth.
So we
So,
talk to our barn expert. Jeff? Could you just speak into the microphone? Yep.
It's what's there now. I'm not saying it's historically accurate, but the Harb's guidelines was to leave what was there as much as possible. So it will replicate in profile what is already there.
Is it safe to say that the frame part of the rear of that building that now is sided was an addition?
It was an addition, and it was actually the back of the barn, and we had a lot of conversations because of the orientation of the park. It has still become the front of the barn. From a barn preservation point of view, that's where you would have put the new addition. But the way the site plan is developed and the way the whole property is laid out, it's backwards. And so that and the 3 levels of the southern facade made all the challenges here that we went through in order to minimize that adverse impact.
Okay. Would the
So
maker of the motion, are you satisfied with that, Suzanne, or do you want to maybe
I
amend
guess-
the motion and maybe have Harb consider an 8-inch?
I mean, I guess,
Reveal?
again, I'm not, I don't want to step on the experts' toes, including the 4 gentlemen who are in front of us tonight. But let's pretend that the addition was added recently and it was added, because the people who added it didn't have such experts and didn't have the option of a wider plank. And so we're now just reproducing the ugly instead of taking an opportunity, if appropriate, to make it look nicer. So if that's, yes, I would defer to whoever else has more thoughts on this than me, but it's just striking to me that it looks weird.
Well, we were asked to keep it the way it was.
I respectfully, I would stick with the Harb's guidance as they are architects and historic preservationists and felt very strongly about this. I get the point, Suzanne.
I watched
Did they
all the
consider it?
meetings,
Did they
Dan, and I
consider it then?
remember the
Oh, they went
discussion
over
about, I watched all the meetings, Dan. I remember the discussion about the Harb weighing in on people dining privacy, which I'm just not so sure about that being a Harb issue, but I don't remember them saying when the barn was built in 1742, I made up that year, folks, I'm not being specific, that these planks were there at that time. And I would hate, if they say these are historic and they should stay, then I'm there. But if these were just things that got, shoved up there, why repeat the ugly?
Is that currently wood siding or is it
Early wood, yeah.
could run? Okay. Yeah, I don't know if wood, do you know when the addition was done? Do you know when the addition was done?
Sometime after this 1960s.
Okay.
It sounds more like, Levittown siding, not that there's anything wrong with Levittown. I'm from New York, where Levittown started, but if we're gonna make it look great, and if you guys want to do it, and if the Harb says it makes sense, but let's really take a moment and make sure that's what we want and not just that's what was there and put up recently.
I have to admit that was not an issue that anybody at Harb raised. I mean, it was, that's the way it is, and that's the way that it was approved.
Just throwing it out, for whatever you guys.
Does it change I mean, I guess we wouldn't want to send this back for harbor. I don't think, yeah.
I don't want to.
With all due respect, the fact that the Pennsylvania Historic Museum Commission and the National Register of Historic Places consider things that have achieved significance with the beyond the last 50 years as being period of historic significance. So many of us don't think 50 years ago was that long ago, but that's the guidelines that not to speak for the HARB, but
Sure.
you know, the preservationists, that's the basic guidelines that preservationists work under. And yes, sometimes it is to either reproduce or leave the ugly because it's been there for over 50 years.
Okay. Thank you. Comments, John?
Yeah, and for the record, I am not an architectural critic. I have read Paul Goldberger on the New York Times architectural critic. I, in general, think the before and after here is pretty striking, and the after is very attractive, just in terms of design. My visual sense is just one person's, but so I think the process has been good in that respect. I have a couple questions though. One is around ADA accessibility between the levels of the dining. So I noticed I could see ADA accessibility from the one end where you can walk up at the same place where you had the stairs. But I was concerned between the two dining levels, right? So for example, if I'm sitting outside, right? And if I didn't want to take the rain example, but assume it rains, or I've got to go to the bathroom, I want to go upstairs. I have to walk upstairs to get up there. Or can I walk around to get into the building? And is that the most accessible way that could be for folks to access the interior of the building?
That lower deck is tied into the pedestrian walkway around the building. It is at the same level. And the upper level deck is at the same level as the interior of the restaurant. So the two levels do have accessibility.
So-
Yes, to your point.
You'd have to walk around.
Correct. If you're on that lower level, correct.
If you're on the lowest level.
Okay. But if you're on the deck level that's enclosed, there's no stairs.
Correct.
So the only stairs are coming from that level lower.
To the lower patio.
Okay, and so and I think that it's got to it'll meet the ADA compliance. The other question I have about the outside is, are there any limitations on decor? And the reason I asked that, and again, I hadn't thought of it until Supervisor Weiss had mentioned this, was, for example, large umbrellas or other sorts of signage that could detract from the visual appeal of the property. And I think what you've done by trying to separate out the clear section, for lack of a better term, is done in a lot of places to preserve the visual appeal of the original, right? And clearly define what is new. But that could get junked up a little bit by decor outside. Is there limitations or strategies to deal with that? And there may not be, for example, formal lease agreement stuff, but those are the kinds of things that I think about. Like, if we're looking at this visually, what could go wrong, right?
Or what could go right?
Sure.
Two things here. You could see the structure and the money that it's going to take to convert this structure into a usable restaurant, and the level of the restaurant that's going to be here, and hopefully the rent that they're able to pay in order to afford us to do the construction that's here. I think we have to trust that things will be done tastefully. There could be umbrellas on the lower deck in the summertime to, help keep people cooler and other things like that. So there is no limitation right now. Us as the owner of the center don't want to see things junked up and not done correctly for the overall success of this tenant plus the other surrounding tenants. So we don't have that defined yet, but I will say that will be something we pay attention to.
If I could add, the HARB may actually, if there's signage issues, the HARB still would have some oversight over some
Yeah.
things like
Yeah.
that too.
Yeah.
So
Signage would be,
But decor would not then.
Unless-
umbrellas would not.
umbrellas would not, umbrellas generally would not probably. be part of
Yeah.
that.
Again, I'm only just thinking, my ideal is if you found the right tenant and good, hopefully that they want a I don't want to say understated signage to fit with the branding elements associated with the proposed tenant. That it would be almost, that it just wouldn't be garish in its design. And again, I'm not a designer, not an architect, but although I could always apply that I know it when I see it, look, but.
No, we understand and we'll be paying attention to those items as well.
Yeah, I guess to Supervisor Lewis's point, additionally, and then just elaborating even more further is is tents, canopies, that sort of kind of temporary outdoor space where you can throw in those portable heaters and that sort of thing. I could see where a restaurant might want to go down that road if it means that they can extend the amount of people that they can have there for longer amounts of times during the season. So I guess that kind of goes hand in
But
hand.
that'll all be on the lower level. Yeah, I mean, you're right. It's a concern.
Yeah.
And it's going to be addressed during the leasing process because I think the point is very well taken. But on the other hand, that's all on the lower level because the upper level is all
It's all enclosed, yeah. Yeah.
Got a roof.
To your point, and Mr. Majusi's here, he might know off the top of his head, during, not like we're out of COVID, but during the height of COVID, restaurants would put up the, sort of indoor outdoor thing, whether or not it works, I don't know, but are restaurants allowed in our code? I'm just looking at this, if they somehow set up that type of, I think, who had it? Continental had something on the side of their.
Yeah, in the borough, in the parking lot, they
Oh,
set up
Tavern had
temporary
something, yeah.
tents. Yeah.
Is that allowed here in the worst case scenario?
Technically, that's not allowed. During COVID, we did allow some slack on that
Yeah.
for everyone, just so that they could stay in business and serve the community more safely. But in general, that's not a forever thing.
I just
In
wanted
Lower
to make sure
Mayfield.
that was covered in our code.
Cool.
Well, I'm going to take a look just to make sure, but I don't think it's allowed. It's something that just during COVID, we allowed businesses to do that. And only a few took advantage of that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I mean, listen, at the end of the day, this is what you guys visualize it looking like, right?
Mhm.
So the last thing you want to do is have anybody throw up anything that's going to take away from the aesthetic beauty from it. So I think that we're all on board when it comes to that. Any other comments? Any public comment? Okay, hearing none, call to question. All those in favor for the certificate of appropriateness for 915 Antique Alley, raise your hand and say aye. Oh, wait. One on the line. So close.
Fif- 15-second rule.
Can you hear me?
Only for you.
They hung up.
Let's see, 15-second rule.
All right, so call to question. All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, none.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations. Just a
Thank you.
quick follow-up now that you do have the approval. How soon do you think the announcement of the restaurant is going to be?
Yeah, we hope by the end of the year because we have been.
Okay,
And if not, early part of January,
excellent. Looking forward to it.
us as well.
Yeah.
Any updates, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Same concept, generally on schedule for, we heard a little bit about where you're at with your civil works. Any updates on schedule for building pads, the road work, all that
Yeah,
stuff?
so I mean, you may
Fingers
know that the Wegmans pad is completed and right now they have a building permit. My understanding is they're not going to start construction in 2022. They're going to wait closer to February 1 to get started just because of winter conditions. And that would be the same thing with CVS. I'm not so sure if they have their building permit or not yet. And Chase is ready to go. We have to do a few more things site-wise to, get their pad ready. But I understand that they're going to start as soon as we have the pad, which could be as soon as the end of this month, middle of December, depending on weather. As far as the retail goes, we do have, 2 leases that are getting ready for execution, one being a Firebirds restaurant, which is, you're familiar with Redstone. They have one in Montgomery. Firebirds has a location in Montgomery County, and they have about 35 to 40 throughout the United States. So we're excited that we're pretty far along the negotiations there and hope to have that signed. And we hope to start construction on that building, which would be built before in the retail in early spring, probably right around March. Same thing with the restaurant that we're here in front of you tonight with. Hopefully that's about a March start. All them would open the latter part of 23 or, very early in 24. And First Watch is another, which is a breakfast lunch spot. I don't know if you're familiar with that company, but they run a very good business for breakfast and lunch. So we're excited to have them. And we're working with some other tenants, but I can't say who they are at the moment because we're not far enough along.
You might give them an update on road improvements.
Yes.
Oh, okay. So road improvements were paved all the way up to the Wegmans pad in the parking lot there. We have the one that goes adjacent to the roadway that's adjacent to the office park. That leads back, that goes right along where Chase is and back towards the Wegman site. The other road that comes off of the circle, the main entrance, partially paved, but that's, some road work still needs to be done there before paving can be placed. And
What about frontage and
yeah, the PennDOT frontage, right now it's all permitted. PennDOT should have their package ready to go out any day now. They're thinking that the bid would be awarded by the end of this year and work would start there, February, March of next year.
that's the bypass improvements.
So that's what most residents will notice when driving.
Yeah.
Yeah, that permit, my understanding is that permit has been issued, and then it has to go out for bid. But that's well
Yeah,
underway.
that's probably about a 6 to 7 month process, so basically be completed by the end of 2023.
Excellent. Anything else regarding, while we have you in the seat, right?
Thank you very much. We appreciate.
Have a good night.
Thanks for coming out, guys. Appreciate it very much. Thanks. All right, we are at agenda item number 13, general public comment. Anybody want to say anything? Anybody on the phone want to say anything? Sounds like nothing. Is there any discussion items that we need to discuss? Hearing none. Agenda item number 15, supervisor reports. I have nothing to report at this time. Dr. Weiss?
The ad hoc property committee met. They, how we doing with the contracts? Done? Contracts done? They're gonna have a walkthrough on Friday to start the process. And Disability Advisory Board met. Nothing special. I think I'm good.
Thank you. Supervisor Grenier?
Actually, I got reports on all of them this time. The Electric Reliability Committee, we had an interview today. They continue to ask for, continue to ask for PICO to come in front of the board and are looking for guidance in terms of the future of what their committee will be. The HARB, we just heard about the HARB for a while there. Historic Commission, they reviewed the draft RFP that Avison Young put together, and I think we all received a bunch of comments from Dr. Hines representing the Historic Commission relative to that specific RFP. Separately, I reviewed the proposals from Avison Young and gave those comments to Mr. Trulove as well. So they have concerns about that RFP, as you all saw. And then the Planning Commission met Monday, and they made a motion to recommend pulling the advertisement of the cluster development ordinance because unanimously, because they thought there were, to paraphrase, way too many issues with the ordinances written, and they think it needs a lot more work before it goes to advertisement. And they had lots of good comments. Generally, everyone's in favor of promoting more open space. I think that goes without saying. But there were lots of sort of devils in the details and making sure that the actually, one of the members is here now. I don't think I'm going to quote him directly, but basically that the proverbial road is paved with good intentions, but doesn't always end up that way once you get through it. So all that being said, they'd like us to have our advisory boards and commissions dig into that ordinance before it goes for advertisement. And that's my report.
So they didn't want to meet again to make those recommendations? It was already been advertised, so we can't pull it.
Well, technically it hasn't, Mr. Majewski left. As of last night, or as of the meeting on Monday, it had not been advertised.
No, we advertised it.
No, we voted to approve advertisement of it. Per Mr. Majewski and Barb, it hadn't actually been advertised yet.
Although I think I think they're mistaken. I think it.
Are they okay,
Oh, yeah,
so,
it Definitely was advertised.
so that was the message that they got, that it hadn't actually been advertised yet.
No,
So
because I think that it was like chicken or the egg that we kept going back and forth on, whether you have to make the advertisement first, because I think one of the biggest things was if it starts going to committee and it gets out there, then the developers now that are catching wind of what the.
Yeah, and that was something I discussed earlier, that the pending ordinance doctrine recently was whittled down, at least temporarily perhaps, by the Commonwealth Court, but that may still, I mean, who knows what's going to happen with that? I mean, I think it's still viable. To Mr. Grenier's point, both Planning Commission and EAC, and I guess Park and Rec may have some way in.
Yeah.
Certainly will have more opportunities. Our expectation would be Bucks County Planning Commission is probably going to have a lot of comments. It'll come back and it'll go back. This could take months, frankly, to be where anybody wants it. So, I'm not, I understand the concerns by everybody, and I think the pending ordinance doctrine is still something that's viable, but this is going to get a lot of vetting. So,
yeah, and that's really the point, to your point, is that they just want to make sure that it's not advertised, and then the first day we have an opportunity to vote to approve it, we go and approve it as is, because it doesn't look to be ready for prime time in there.
yeah, I don't think the Bucks County Planning Commission is not going to come back without significant comments. I'm pretty sure.
And what was the,
A lot will be substantive too, I'm sure.
and there was an advantage to advertising it first.
Well, that was the whole pending ordinance issue that I discussed last time.
Correct.
I said, I just found out, just today that, at the end of October, Commonwealth Court issued an opinion that very few people knew about till more recently, that whittled that pending ordinance doctrine back some. But again, that may go to Supreme Court. So it's still kind of it's been on the books for decades. So I can't imagine there's not going to be somebody taking that up. So,
Got it.
but, we're still, the most important thing for everybody's consideration is that, all these different interest groups and committees will have an opportunity to weigh, as they should. Because I can't imagine that the different reviewing agencies are not going to have a lot of opinions about it. So.
And I don't think any ordinance concerning development in this township has been fast voted. It's taken years to do anything in this township with development and with proper reason, whether it was our master plan that took 10 years, our overlay ordinance, which took at least a year, and this ordinance and the UPC even, when we redo our, that's done with a lot of different input and especially with this ordinance, it was basically a board generated ordinance. So I appreciate the planning commission being concerned, but I would never pass anything unless I was certain that the community backed it. So whether the chicken came first or the egg came first, the product is what's important. A good, healthy chicken, roasted, little lemon, little butter.
Yeah, I think the only reason we did it was because of the strategy that we talked about. That's all it was the strategy to make sure that we were in front of it before developers got to it. So,
But just so everybody knows, the day after the board took its action, we received an email from a well-known developer's attorney asking for a copy of it. So he was already somehow, I don't know if you watched the meeting or somehow you get one.
And that's a very.
That's
good
exactly the
point,
reason
because
why.
Now that this is a pending ordinance, developers can't do something else. We stopped development until this is done. Versus, Yeah, so nobody.
Yeah,
can
that was
sneak
the
something out.
From what my understanding was that was the strategy that night.
Yeah, and like I said, it may be a little bit in limbo because of that recent
Sure.
decision, but I mean, it's.
At the time, it was the right
Yeah,
strategy.
and it's still, I think, arguably a viable one, but
Mm-hmm.
it does not remove the opportunity for a lot of weigh-in, which is the most important thing, as everybody I think agrees here, so.
Absolutely. You want to continue with your updates or that was it? Excellent. All right. Supervisor Blondie, do you have any updates on your reports there?
I don't, thank you.
Thank you so much. And Supervisor Lewis?
Yes, on Monday, November the 21st, the Citizens Traffic Commission will be meeting. They'll be discussing Bluestone and Fieldstone intersection for those that are affected. Also, line of sight on Roloffs and Denny Drive are the two major agenda items for that. I don't have an update on Trenton Mercer's different than previously, and this, nothing on the Veterans Commission. That's it.
Thank you, sir. Any other business? Hearing none, moving to agenda item number 17. At this time, I will entertain a motion to reappoint Richard Eisner to the Golf Committee.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Supervisor Lewis, seconded by Supervisor Weiss. Any discussion? All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye. Aye. I will also entertain a motion to reappoint Ms. Helen Bosley to the Golf Committee.
I'll make that motion.
Second,
Motion made by Supervisor Lewis, seconded by Supervisor Blondie. Any discussion? All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye. Aye.
aye.
And last but not least, I'd like to entertain a motion to reappoint Lynn Cataro to the Disability Advisory Board.
So moved.
Second,
Motion made by Supervisor Weiss, seconded by Supervisor Grenier. All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
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 And I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Moved.
All those in favor? What did I miss?
Aye.
Did
I thought
wanna
we
do
were,
that?
I thought we were discussing it more.
I would hold just because of further discussion.
Okay.
That
We good?
No further business.
We good? Cool. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Say aye. Meeting adjourned. Thanks.
Less than 2 hours. Okay.